Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful January morning. We are especially appreciative of doTERRA hosting us today. Want to thank you all for joining us. Today, you will hear from Mallory Bateman, a demographer with the Kempsey Gardner Institute.
I can tell you Mallory is a Utahn through and through, but was born in Bangkok. Her parents were in the federal service and traveled around the world a lot. She is currently the director of demographic research at the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. She has a bachelor's degree in urban planning from the University of Utah and a master's in social policy and planning from the London School of Economics. We're honored to have Mallory here. She's a very bright person with a wonderful personality. So please welcome a Utah Valley Chamber applause to Mallory Bateman.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm over at the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. If you're not familiar with us, we're part of the University of Utah, and we focus on demographics, which is my area, economics and public policy, and survey research. With what you all do, there might be some other papers of interest or other research areas that we cover, and I would recommend hitting up our website for more insights. Remember these things, that a growing and changing population is a long-standing constant in Utah. That is, we think maybe we don't change, but we do. I'm going to focus based on basic demographics and not so much socioeconomic characteristics. And part of that is because of the recent release of the 2020 census data. So we're not going to get into income or education that much today. Nationally, as well as in Utah, urban areas were the areas that grew and grew significantly, while our smaller communities and maybe more rural communities either didn't really grow or even had population decline. Utahns as a whole are becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. That's experienced differently throughout the state, but Utah County is definitely one of the areas that is experiencing that change. Our area has grown for a long time, but you can see that there's some different kind of trajectories of growth. So down at the bottom, the darkest gray line and the light blue line, you've got Wyoming and Montana that have had kind of just a nice, slow and steady pace, continuing to grow, but nothing too wild. And those two lines at the top, you've got Arizona and Colorado. You can see a pitch upward for Arizona when air conditioning became more regular, but also diversifying economies, different things going on in the state. And then you see us, sorry, Utah's going to be red in almost every figure. It's University of Utah bias. I'm sorry. But you can see we're the bright red line here, and you can see that we have an uptick. We kind of were on that slow and steady and then bumped up, especially in the 90s. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. Our neighbors, Idaho has another little uptick as well. They keep popping up as a fast growing state. So we're an area, a region that has grown for a long time. With the 2020 data, Utah was the fastest growing state in the nation. We love being on top, but this was also more moderated growth, moderated throughout the nation. It was actually the lowest growth rate in a decade since the 1930s. A lot of factors going into that. We'll discuss some of them in a minute, but we were the fastest growing state at 18.4%. It's around 507,000 new Utahns. It's actually lower than our 2000 to 2010 growth, as well as our 1990 to 2000 growth. So we're the fastest growing. We added the most people, but we have kind of already been there before and added more people. Again, you can see Idaho, Nevada popping on this figure as well for high growth rates, and Texas. So all of those combined, Intermountain West rules. This is just kind of a nerd thing, but geographically speaking, if every person weighed the same, this is where the balance point would be in the nation. And you can see that since the first census in 1790, it's been going south and west. Obviously, westward expansion changed the picture of the nation, but you can see the impact of, Texas, as well as us out in the Intermountain West. All of the states out west, if you notice on that last map, were positive growth areas. The Midwest, Northeast have some different pictures of the population change they're experiencing. So all of that works to combine to make Hartsville, Missouri, our main center of population. So just kind of a fun thing. We had to wait a long time for that one. So I'm very excited we have that data point. So with the 2020 census, we ended up with 3,271,616 Utahns. That is on track with what we kind of expected throughout the decade. The stars on the red line, which are our population line, mark when we hit millions. So we hit our first million in 1966. So that slow and steady got us to 1 million people in 1966. We got to 2 million around 1995. That's when we saw that uptick in the line. We have some different growing trends starting in the 90s. And then you can see that we hit 3 million in the early 2010s. So, you know, we're going at a more rapid pace than we used to, but a lot of that is due to our economy. We're one of the top economies. We always have low unemployment. We have a lot of opportunity for people. And so that has impacted how we've grown. This is just showing those 2020 census results overall. And you can see Utah County around 660,000 residents. So that's April 1 of 2020. Salt Lake is still our largest county, but you can see kind of the Wasatch Front on here popping on this map, southwestern Utah popping on the map, and then the rest of our counties being a little bit smaller. So when you look at the community level, we've got some very different things happening specifically here and in Southern Salt Lake County. So these were the fastest growing. This is like the highest rate of change. And you can see Vineyard on the top of this list growing by almost 9,000%, going from 150 people to over 12,000. Pretty wild. But then you can also see everyone on this list is either Southern Salt Lake County or Northern Utah County. So this area has had so much growth in the past decade. It's really been the center. I pulled a couple of these numbers, but Saratoga Springs and Eagle Mountain, Lehigh all added over 20,000 people. So those gaps, the blue on here is the 2010 population, and then the red outline is the 2020 population. So if there's a bigger white gap on this figure, that means more people moved in the last decade. And I'm bringing this little nerd fact back. Thinking about that center of population in Utah, it's also, we had some initial going north, but then it's moved south and west as well. And if you think about the influence of this region of Southern Salt Lake County, Northern Utah County, as well as Southwestern Utah, it makes sense that that pull would be going in that direction. You can also see that between 2010 and 2020, it didn't move that much. So a lot of the growth was very localized to kind of this region, which helped kind of shorten that distance between that mean center of population point. So this is our new data. These are our Utah Population Committee estimates, and they come out annually. So this is looking between 2020 and 2021. And this one is pretty wild because Utah County was basically responsible for about a third of the statewide population growth. So you can see on this map, it's a lot darker in color. It's because you all added around 19,000 new residents in your county, and no one else is experiencing that level of growth. So you've got a lot going on, and it's an attractive place to people. And I keep saying things like this because it's not just babies that create our population growth. I'll get into that more in a minute. And here we go. So these are our drivers of population change. It's either natural increase, which is births minus deaths. So there's our babies, or net migration, which is people moving here. Largely kind of people move for economic reasons. They might move for educational reasons. You've got both of those in hand in Utah County. So this is showing kind of the long picture back to 1960. The gray area here is net migration. And so you can see in the 90s, that gray area stays above the zero line, meaning we've had more people moving in than people moving out. You can see there's a little dip with the Great Recession, but overall migration is becoming a more stable piece of our growth in Utah. Natural increase is that red dotted line, and you can see that since 2008, it's kind of started to trend down. That's because we've got trends here that are happening everywhere. We have an aging population. So people, even though we're still the youngest state in the nation, we can hold on to our youth. We're all getting older. We have that combined with reduced total fertility rates. And Governor Herbert was asking me this earlier, so I pulled up the numbers. So we're no longer #1 for total fertility rate. And I'll actually kind of show you a better picture for this in a minute. We're behind the Dakotas. And the three of us are all under replacement rate, which is 2.1 babies per couple. So this is looking back to the 90s where we have that steep incline in the line. And you can see that without people moving here, we would have had a very different kind of growth picture. If you think back to those those Intermountain West lines, we probably would have been a little bit more like the Montana, Wyoming, kind of just going a good constant pace, growing a little bit all the time, but not having kind of that expansive growth that we've had. We're going to revisit this. We're putting out our new population projections. I know everyone wanted to hear like the future. We're putting those out next week. So I'm really sorry, but I'm going to give you some highlights, but we're going to revisit this and see what it looks like. But you can just see the red on here are all the people who moved here in the 90s. Their kids may be staying, those kids having their own kids, and the growth that continues because of that migration that we had in the 1990s. This is just one thing looking at migration within the state, and you can see Utah County. So grays on these figures indicate growth and reds indicate decline. And this is looking at 15 to 24-year-olds. We wanted to look at college kids, but because of the data, it has to be 15 to 24. And then 25 to 29, you've got young adults that are typically a little bit more mobile. And you can see that people come to Utah County. You've got a lot of educational opportunities. You've got a lot of employment opportunities, a lot of diverse employment opportunities that bring people here. While in a lot of our state, we have maybe fewer opportunities, fewer options for people. And so in our smaller, more rural communities, young people tend to leave and are drawn to kind of the urban core. So this is looking at total fertility rate. Again, we're the red line. The nation is the gray line. And you can see that we've kind of trended along with the nation with the exception of kind of the 70s, but we've always been higher and we remain higher. And we only have the data to 2019. They haven't released the state level 2020 data yet. COVID put some fun additions to that data. We are now number 3 in total fertility rate, where we had long been number 1. Most babies a woman could expect to have in her childbearing years. We're now behind the Dakotas. Part of that is reduced teen birth rates. So that's great. Everyone wants that. Like, let's keep our teens safe. But then also declines in kind of younger moms. So early 20s moms, those rates have dropped in all of the states. In the Dakotas, the moms in their 30s, kind of later 30s, those rates have actually increased and ours haven't quite kept up. So that's part of what's going on here. As I mentioned, we are the youngest state in the nation. This is using the 2019 data. We're waiting for the new census data that gives us the full age detail. So I can give you a new number later on this year. But you can see that we've kind of followed that national trend again in our own Utah way. There's different needs coming around than what we are maybe used to. Even here in Utah County, things are also changing. This is looking at the state, and you can see Utah County and Cache County have some different age dynamics than other areas of the state. That's the 2 youngest counties. Obviously, you've got the influence of the universities, but then you've also got lots of young families in both of these communities. Again, lots of employees, potential employees. But then you can see those rural communities too that are maybe sending their young people to, places like Utah County. They're a lot older. Looking at like Paiute or Daggett up in the mid 40s, it's kind of more reflective of the Northeast nationally. But Utah and Idaho are kind of the funny ones on the age map. We're a lot younger than everybody else. So we're maintaining that distinct characteristic. This is again from 2010 to 2020. Utah County just came in under Salt Lake County for total additional residents, around 143,000. The Utah Population Committee, we thought that it was going to be a little bit higher. It was going to beat Salt Lake County. So that was a little bit of a surprise to us. And you can see, again, Northern Utah kind of having a different rate of growth as well, kind of those counties near the urban core. So Wasatch County kind of blew up. Part of that is, it's an attractive place to be, but it's also really close to Utah County. It's really close to Salt Lake County. If you need to get away from Wasatch County, get in and get to services or jobs or whatever, you've got more opportunities. So you can see, obviously, Utah County grew faster than the state overall. You've got a fast growing area here. Again, this is looking at those dynamics. So this is looking between all of the counties. About 2/3 of our growth came from natural increase, so more births than deaths. This is in the decade. And then net migration was about 1/3. And that's pretty significant in a place where we used to be all naturally increased all the time. You can see kind of there's some different dynamics here. Utah County is pretty close to the state here. We've got 2/3 of the growth coming from natural increase, and then another third coming from net migration. The net migration counties also kind of highlight some of their own distinct characteristics. If you look at this list, we've got Iron County, Washington County, Morgan, Summit, Wasatch. There's some different dynamics in these communities that make them grow in a different way. And then I'll also throw out, just if in case you're curious, the counties in natural increase that have higher than 100% from natural increase means more people were moving out. More births than deaths was what made the area grow at all. So Utah County is kind of a nice benefit of having a stable way to grow based on natural increase as well as net migration. So the other thing we got from the census data so far, and this is all just from the redistricting data, which was used to redraw all of our political boundaries, but it's also useful for us, provides a baseline for looking forward. So I'll throw that out as well. But over half of our growth, over half of those 507,000 new Utahns were people who identified outside of non-Hispanic white. And then the blue figure kind of highlights how that all breaks down. The Hispanic or Latino population is over half of that growth, just barely. And then you have some other dynamics going on. The Census Bureau tried to, because of states like California and Texas and Nevada, New York, where more of the population identifies as a racial or ethnic minority than the white population, they kind of changed their terminology and have leaned into this terminology called the diversity index. So it's the likelihood if you pick two people at random in a room that they would have a different racial or ethnic background. Utah fell in the 40s, I believe. So we're kind of like low middle range compared to the rest of the nation. But when you zoom into the counties, you can see Utah County has a slightly different dynamic than a lot of our smaller rural counties. Salt Lake, San Juan County have their own dynamics going on, Weber and Grand as well. And so all of that combines to have 1 in 4 Utahns now identifying as a race or ethnicity other than white. And that's an increase from before when it was around 1 in 5 in 2010. So that's an increase. And then in Utah County, it's a change from kind of around that 85% to around 79% now. So about 1 in 5 Utah County residents are identifying outside of non-Hispanic white. And then I pulled the areas that are the most racially and ethnically diverse within Utah County. And you can see Orem, Provo, Vineyard. So there's a mix of the big communities, the smaller communities. There's some different dynamics going on that are going to impact, your employment opportunities, who you're marketing to, who you need to come and use your business or organization. This is just looking at that racial or ethnic makeup at the county level by most prevalent. That's another way that the Census Bureau is mixing this up. White alone, not Hispanic or Latino, is the most prevalent race group throughout the state, with the exception of San Juan County. Flips in the second most, the middle graph there is Hispanic or Latino. San Juan County, it becomes the white population. And then that last map, 2 or more races, not Hispanic or Latino, is the most prevalent in most of the state. And that's seen here as well. It's a growing group, and that's a lot of our youth, which hopefully is the next slide. Yeah, our younger populations are more racially and ethnically diverse. So that's maybe something to consider when you're thinking about younger employees or younger people that you're working with. There's more going on, especially Provo is actually one of the really high growth areas for this population, which I thought was interesting. So this is looking at the state and the share. There's a lot going on in this very simple figure, but the share of under 18 declined. But even with that, you've got more racial and ethnic diversity in our younger groups. And then looking at Utah County, you have a similar situation again, with more of our kids identifying as racial or ethnic minorities. This is a product that we put out a couple years ago that we will revisit again after we've got our projections out. But the red line on the left is showing that we're again kind of following that national trajectory in a Utah way. We're anticipating more racial and ethnic diversity in our population as we move into the future. And then on the right, on the other side, the one with 4 lines, that shows 2010 and 2060 and the differences between Utah and the US, with the youth in the 0 of the axis moving out to the older population. And you can just see more of our youth, younger people identifying as racial or ethnic minorities. So I wanted to, we have to look back to be able to look forward. That's how I'll frame this. So looking back, I tried to find something interesting from Utah County. And sorry if everyone's not Provo, but this was a little bit easier to identify looking forward. So looking back, we've got this historical photo. And then we look forward and we've got some changes, but there's still some of those bones that were there before that help kind of inform, how we look forward. So with that, I'm going to give you a little sneak preview, general sneak preview. So tomorrow, the economic report to the governor is being released. And we have a little bit of our projections information in there. So I'm going to kind of give you some loosey-goosey data since it's technically not out yet. Utah County is projected in our new set of projections. So that's considering those changes to fertility, increased life expectancy. We anticipate that will continue to increase. And we anticipate that net migration is going to continue to be a strong force in our growth. So those three things kind of change the picture from what we put out 4 years ago. These new data points indicate Utah County being the growth leader for people, for households. Households isn't in the economic report to the governor, so don't tweet about that one. That one's top secret till next week. But it's going to continue to grow, and it's going to be a vibrant community that continues to grow. In our projections, that is, Utah County is strong, and that growth isn't going away. We've also got some different dynamics. There were some different considerations. We got to include some partnership with Wasatch Front Regional Council and MAG that kind of considered land use. And so the numbers might look slightly different than they did, maybe not quite as astronomical as they did last time around. But that's considering what communities plan to have on the ground in the future. So just a little lens for thinking about those numbers when they come out. Some exciting tables in the economic report to the governor tomorrow. I'm sorry, I can't talk about those at more length, but I don't want to disappoint you, but I do think, okay, so I do think in our new projections, Utah County stays just below Salt Lake County out to 2060 in terms of population. So that's a change that was impacted by that land use consideration. So that's the detail I'll give you. I'm not giving you the numbers though. Those are exciting. We gotta make people come to the website and click through and read our report and everything. So yeah, just looking again at the community, how it's changed. We need to think about the past to think about the future. And that's a very important consideration in our work. And so I appreciate you letting me take up some of your lunchtime to chat with you about this. And I'll also throw out, feel free to contact me. The point of our work is for people to use it. So if you ever do have questions about any of our products, our population products, I'm not an economist, so I can't help you with the econ stuff. I could point you to those people, but reach out and let me know if you do have questions. If you need data points, I'm happy to help however I can. And if I can't help, I'll try to find the person that can.